The baby's wailing shattered the midnight silence like a gunshot across the New Mexico plains. And Hannah Jameson knew she had reached the end of her rope when her arms began trembling so violently she feared she might drop her daughter. The tiny adobe house on the outskirts of Albuquerque in 1878 offered little comfort against the harsh realities of frontier life, and even less against the bone-deep exhaustion that had become Hannah's constant companion. 6 months had passed since her husband, Thomas, died from a rattlesnake bite while working cattle, leaving her alone with 3-month-old Sarah, and a small parcel of land that demanded more than one woman could possibly give. The baby had been colicky from birth, crying for hours every night, and Hannah had not slept more than 2 hours consecutively since the funeral. Her milk had started drying up from the stress and fatigue, making Sarah even more irritable, creating a vicious cycle that threatened to break them both. Hannah paced the small room, bouncing Sarah against her shoulder, murmuring soothing words that held no power anymore. The kerosene lamp flickered on the rough-hewn table, casting shadows that danced across the walls like mocking specters. Her eyes burned with unshed tears and sleeplessness, her body swaying dangerously as vertigo swept through her. She had not eaten properly in days, unable to keep anything down due to the constant anxiety and exhaustion. The neighbors had helped at first, bringing casseroles and offering condolences, but life moved on quickly in the West, and people had their own troubles to tend. Sarah's cries intensified, her tiny face red and scrunched with misery that seemed too large for such a small body. Hannah's legs buckled slightly, and she grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. The room spun, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might faint right there with her baby in her arms. A sob caught in her throat as she realized she could not do this anymore, could not make it through another night alone, could not be the mother Sarah needed when she had nothing left to give. The knock at the door startled her so badly she nearly dropped the baby. Her heart hammered against her ribs as fear flooded through her. Visitors at midnight meant trouble, always had in these parts. Bandits, drifters, men with bad intentions drawn to a widow living alone. She stood frozen, Sarah still screaming in her arms, wondering if she should pretend no one was home. "Madam," the voice from outside was male, deep but gentle. "I heard the baby crying. I am camped just over the ridge. Name is Kane Barrett. I do not mean any harm, but I thought maybe you could use some help." Hannah's first instinct was to tell him to go away, but another wave of dizziness swept through her, and she found herself moving toward the door instead. Some desperate part of her brain overrode every sensible warning her mother had ever given her about strange men. She cracked the door open, keeping the chain latched, and peered out into the darkness. The man standing on her small porch was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty trail clothes and a worn Stetson that shadowed his face. Even in the dim light spilling from her doorway, she could see his hands held nothing, palms open and visible. He stood well back from the door, giving her space, his posture non-threatening. "I apologize for disturbing you this late," he said, his voice carrying a hint of Texas drawl. "I have been riding for days and stopped to make camp, been listening to the little one crying for near 3 hours now. I got younger sisters, helped raise them when my ma was poorly. If you need someone to walk the floor with the baby so you can rest, I would be happy to help. No strings, no expectations, just one human being helping another." Hannah stared at him, her exhausted mind struggling to process his words. Every rational thought screamed that letting a strange man into her home in the middle of the night was dangerous and foolish. But Sarah's cries had reached a pitch that felt like nails driving into Hannah's skull, and the kindness in the stranger's voice made something inside her crack wide open. "How do I know you are not going to rob me or worse?" she asked, her voice hoarse from exhaustion and emotion. Kane slowly reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a tin star, holding it up to the light. "I am a Texas Ranger, madam, or was, until about a month ago. Resigned my commission to head west, but I still carry the values. I give you my word as a lawman and a gentleman that you and your baby will be safe. I just want to help." Something in his eyes, visible now as he tilted his head up, convinced her. Maybe it was the genuine concern she saw there, or maybe she was simply too tired to care about the risk anymore. Her hands shook as she unlatched the chain and opened the door wider. Kane stepped inside carefully, removing his hat and hanging it on the peg by the door. In the lamplight, Hannah could see him more clearly. He was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and a strong jaw shadowed with several days of stubble. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, the kind that seemed to see straight through pretense. His clothes were dusty from the trail but well-maintained, and he moved with the easy grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Thank you," Hannah whispered, not quite believing she was doing this. "I have not slept in days, and I think I am about to collapse." "You go lay down," Kane said gently, holding out his arms. "Let me take the little one." Hannah hesitated only a moment before transferring Sarah into his capable hands. The baby seemed startled by the change, her cries hitching for a moment before resuming at full volume. Kane settled her against his chest with practiced ease, supporting her head with one large hand while the other patted her back gently. "There now, little miss," he murmured, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "I know everything feels big and terrible right now, but we are going to get through this night together. Your mama needs to rest, and you and I are going to be friends." Hannah watched, swaying on her feet as Kane began walking a slow circuit around the small room, his boots making soft thuds on the wooden floor. He hummed something low and tuneless, a sound more felt than heard, and kept up a gentle bouncing motion that spoke of real experience with infants. "Go on," he said, glancing at her. "I have got her. I promise I will wake you if she needs feeding or anything else. But you need sleep, madam. You are dead on your feet." Hannah did not have the strength to argue. She stumbled to her narrow bed in the corner and collapsed onto it, fully clothed, not even bothering with the quilt. The last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her was Kane's deep voice quietly singing some old cowboy ballad and Sarah's cries slowly beginning to diminish. She woke to golden sunlight streaming through the window and a silence so profound it frightened her. Hannah bolted upright, her heart racing, immediately looking for Sarah. Panic seized her as memories of the night before came flooding back. She had let a stranger into her home, given him her baby, and fallen asleep. What kind of mother did that make her? But then she saw them. Kane sat in the wooden rocking chair Thomas had made before he died, Sarah sleeping peacefully against his chest. His head was tipped back, eyes closed, one hand still resting protectively on the baby's back. Both were breathing deeply, exhausted from their long night together. On the table beside him sat an empty bottle and a clean cloth, along with a note written in careful script. Hannah crept over and picked up the note, her hands trembling slightly. "Found the goat milk in your cold box and fed her around 3 in the morning. She took about 2 ounces and seemed satisfied. Changed her nappy and got her settled around 5. She has been sleeping since. You were sleeping so soundly I did not want to wake you. You needed the rest. Kane Barrett." Tears sprang to Hannah's eyes as she looked at this stranger who had spent the entire night walking her floor with a crying baby, asking nothing in return. In the morning light, she could see the exhaustion on his face, the dark circles under his eyes, The way his body had finally given in to sleep, still sitting upright with Sarah protected in his arms. She moved closer, studying him properly now that fear and desperation were not clouding her judgment. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features weathered by sun and wind. There was something inherently trustworthy about him, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since Thomas died. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, and his hands, though large and rough from hard work, held Sarah with infinite gentleness. As if sensing her scrutiny, Kane's eyes opened slowly. For a moment he seemed disoriented, then his gaze focused on her and he smiled slightly. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice rough with sleep. "She finally settled around dawn, been out cold since." "You stayed all night," Hannah said, her voice catching. "You really stayed." "Told you I would," Kane replied, carefully shifting Sarah in his arms. "This little lady and I had quite the conversation. She told me all about how hard it is being a baby, and I told her about the stars and the cattle drives and all manner of things. We reached an understanding around 4 in the morning. Despite everything, Hannah found herself smiling. I do not know how to thank you. I was at the end of my rope. I thought I was going to lose my mind." Kane stood slowly, mindful not to wake Sarah, and crossed to Hannah. "No thanks needed, madam, but if I may be so bold, you cannot keep going like this. How long since your husband passed?" 6 months, Hannah said, taking Sarah from him and holding her close, breathing in her baby smell. "Thomas was working cattle when a rattler got him. He died before we could get him to the doctor in town. I have been managing the property alone since then, trying to keep everything together for Sarah's sake." Kane nodded slowly, his eyes showing understanding and sympathy without pity, which Hannah appreciated more than he could know. "That is a heavy load for one person. You got family nearby who can help?" "No one. Thomas was an only child and his parents passed before we married. My family is back east and we parted on bad terms when I decided to come west with Thomas. I wrote to tell them about his death, but I never heard back." The admission hurt, even after all this time. Her parents had warned her that marrying a cowboy and heading to the frontier was foolish, that she would regret leaving civilization behind. She had been too proud and too in love to listen. What about neighbors? They have their own troubles. Everyone does out here. People were kind at first, but life moves on. Hannah looked down at Sarah's sleeping face, feeling tears threaten again. "I thought I could handle it. I thought I was strong enough. But the baby cries every night and I have not slept more than an hour or 2 at a time in months. The land needs tending. The animals need care, and I cannot do it all. I am failing at everything." "You are not failing," Kane said firmly, his voice gentle but certain. "You are surviving impossible circumstances. That takes more strength than most people will ever need to find. But you do need help, and there is no shame in that." Hannah looked up at him, this stranger who had shown her more kindness in one night than she had received in months. "Why did you really stop? The truth." Kane was quiet for a moment, then moved to the window, looking out at the harsh New Mexico landscape bathed in morning sun. "I have been drifting since I left the Rangers a month back. No real direction, no purpose, just riding west because there was nothing pulling me east anymore. Last night when I heard that baby crying, it reminded me what it felt like to be needed, to be useful. I spent years tracking outlaws and keeping the peace, but somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was doing it for. That little girl crying in the night reminded me that sometimes the most important thing a man can do is just show up when someone needs help." There was something in his voice, a depth of feeling that suggested his own pain and loss, though he did not elaborate. Hannah found herself wanting to know more about this man who had appeared at her darkest hour like some kind of frontier angel. Will you stay for breakfast?" she asked, surprising herself with the invitation. "It is the least I can offer after what you did." Kane turned back to her, and the smile that spread across his face transformed it completely, showing the man he must have been before whatever hardness the world had visited upon him. "I would like that very much, madam." "Hannah," she corrected. "If you are going to spend the night walking my floor with my crying baby, I think we can dispense with the formalities." "Hannah Jameson." "Kane Barrett," he replied, though she already knew. "Pleased to make your proper acquaintance, Hannah." While Kane stepped outside to freshen up at the pump and see to his horse, Hannah changed Sarah's nappy and settled her in the handmade cradle before starting breakfast. Her stores were limited, but she managed to put together eggs from her chickens, bread she had baked 2 days ago, and coffee that was probably stronger than necessary but would help them both after the sleepless night. She caught herself checking her reflection in the small mirror by the wash basin, trying to smooth her tangled hair and pinch some color into her pale cheeks. What did it matter what she looked like? Kane was just a passing stranger who had done her a kindness. He would eat breakfast, mount his horse, and ride out of her life just as unexpectedly as he had entered it. But when he came back inside, his face and hands clean, his hair dampened and combed back, Hannah felt something stir in her chest that she had thought died with Thomas. It was not the same feeling she had for her husband. This was different, newer, tinged with the kind of possibility that felt dangerous and thrilling all at once. They sat at the small table, and Hannah watched as Kane ate with the appreciation of a man who had been living on trail rations for too long. He had good manners despite his rough appearance, and he complimented her cooking with genuine enthusiasm. "This is wonderful," he said, accepting a second cup of coffee. "Best meal I have had in weeks. You are a fine cook, Hannah." "It is just eggs and bread," she protested, but pleasure warmed her at the compliment. "Maybe, but there is a difference between food and a meal shared with good company." This is the latter. They talked as they ate, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Kane told her about growing up in Texas, about how he had become a ranger at 21 after his father was killed by a gang of cattle rustlers. He spoke of the years tracking outlaws across harsh territory, of the justice he had served and the toll it had taken on his soul. "I got tired of seeing the worst of humanity," he admitted, staring into his coffee cup. "Every day was violence and cruelty, people hurting each other for the most senseless reasons. I stopped sleeping well, stopped trusting anyone. My captain told me I needed to take a break before the job destroyed me completely. So I resigned and headed west, thinking maybe I would find something better out here." "Have you?" Hannah asked quietly. Kane looked up at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "I am starting to think maybe I have." The moment stretched between them, charged with an awareness that neither quite knew what to do with. Hannah broke eye contact first, flustered and unsure. She was a widow with a baby, exhausted and struggling just to survive. She had no business feeling whatever this was she was starting to feel for a drifter passing through. But Kane did not mount up and ride away after breakfast. Instead, he asked if he could help with some of the chores Hannah had been struggling to manage. She protested weakly, but he was already heading outside to assess what needed doing. By midday, he had repaired the broken fence in the chicken yard, cleared the irrigation ditch that had been clogged for weeks, and chopped enough wood to last her through the next month. Hannah watched him work from the window while Sarah slept peacefully in her cradle, getting more rest during the day than she had in weeks thanks to actually sleeping through the night. Kane moved with efficient purpose, his strong body handling the physical labor with ease. He had stripped down to his shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms, and sweat darkened the fabric across his shoulders. When he came in for water at midday, she had prepared a simple lunch. They ate together again, and the conversation turned to Hannah's story. She told him about meeting Thomas at a church social back east, about how his dreams of the frontier had captured her imagination. She spoke of their journey west, the hardships they had faced, and the joy they had found in building something together. "He was a good man," she said softly, tears threatening as they always did when she spoke of Thomas. "Kind and hard-working. He would have been a wonderful father if he had gotten the chance. When the snake bit him, it happened so fast. One moment he was fine, the next he was on the ground convulsing. By the time we got him to town, the venom had spread too far. He died holding my hand, telling me he was sorry for leaving us." Kane reached across the table and covered her hand with his own, the gesture simple and comforting. "I am sorry you lost him. That kind of pain does not go away easy." "Did you lose someone?" Hannah asked, sensing his words came from experience. "My fiancé," Kane said after a long pause. 3 years back. We were planning to marry that summer. She was traveling from her parents' ranch to town when the stage was held up by the Dalton gang. They killed everyone on board rather than leave witnesses. I tracked them for 6 months and brought every last one of them to justice, but it did not bring Maria back. Nothing could. "Is that why you left the Rangers?" "Part of it. I realized I had turned my grief into anger, and that anger was poisoning everything. Maria would not have wanted me to become the kind of man I was becoming. She was gentle and kind, always seeing the best in people. I needed to find my way back to the man she fell in love with, if that was even possible anymore." They sat in companionable silence, two people who had lost too much but were still trying to find reasons to keep going. When Sarah woke and began fussing, Kane offered to hold her while Hannah prepared the baby's bottle. He walked around the small house, showing Sarah the world through the windows, describing the desert landscape in poetic terms that made Hannah smile despite herself. As the afternoon wore on, Hannah found herself hoping Kane would not leave. The house felt less lonely with him in it, less suffocating. Sarah seemed calmer too, as if sensing that her mother's burden was lighter with someone else to share it. When evening approached, Hannah gathered her courage and asked the question that had been building all day. "Would you stay another night?" The words came out rushed, nervous. "I know I have no right to ask, and you have already done so much, but I thought if you were not in a hurry to be anywhere, maybe you could stay a bit longer. I could pay you for the work you have done, not much, but something." Kane set Sarah in her cradle and turned to face Hannah fully. "I do not want your money, Hannah, but I will stay if you want me to, as long as you need me to." "Why?" she asked, needing to understand. "You do not know me. Why would you do this?" He was quiet for a long moment, seeming to wrestle with how much to reveal. "Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I have a purpose again. Because that little girl needs someone strong to help her mama through the hard times. And because when I look at you, I see someone worth staying for." The honesty in his words stole Hannah's breath. She could see he meant every word, that this was not some line or manipulation. He was laying his cards on the table, letting her see his intentions clearly. "I need to be honest with you," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I feel something when you are here, something I did not expect to feel again, but I am scared. Thomas has only been gone 6 months. I do not know if what I am feeling is real or just gratitude and loneliness." "That is fair," Kane said, moving closer but stopping short of touching her. "I feel something too. Have since I first saw you standing in that doorway holding your crying baby, so exhausted you could barely stand but still fighting to take care of her. But I do not want to rush you or push you into something you are not ready for. What if I stay on, help you get the place in order, and we just see where things go? No pressure, no expectations. Just two people getting to know each other. Hannah nodded, relief and something else, something warmer, flooding through her. I would like that. That night, Sarah cried again, though not as intensely as before. Kane was up immediately, telling Hannah to rest, and once again walked the floor with the baby until she settled. Hannah lay in bed listening to his deep voice singing old songs and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She was not falling for Kane out of desperation or need. She was falling for him because of who he was, the kindness and strength he showed, the gentleness in his hands when he held Sarah, the way he looked at Hannah like she was something precious worth protecting. The days that followed took on a rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Kane made camp outside, insisting it was not proper for him to stay in the house overnight, despite the fact he spent most of each night inside walking with Sarah. During the day, he worked on the property, tackling all the projects Hannah had been unable to manage alone. He repaired the roof, fixed the loose boards in the porch, cleared the well that had been running muddy, and helped her plant a vegetable garden that would provide food through the fall. But it was the small moments that made Hannah's heart open wider each day. The way Kane made funny faces at Sarah to get her to smile. How he brought Hannah wildflowers he found while riding the fence line. The evenings they spent sitting on the porch after Sarah fell asleep, talking about everything and nothing as the sun painted the desert in shades of gold and crimson. "What made you want to be a ranger?" Hannah asked one evening about 2 weeks after Kane had arrived. "My pa," Kane replied, his voice soft with memory. He was not a lawman himself, just a rancher, but he believed in justice and standing up for what was right. "When those rustlers killed him, I was 18 and angry. But it was not just anger that drove me. It was the memory of him telling me that a real man used his strength to protect those who could not protect themselves. I wanted to honor that, to make sure other families did not lose someone the way we lost him. He sounds like he was a good man. The best. He would have liked you, I think. He always said the measure of a person was how they handled hardship, and you have handled more than most with grace and determination." Hannah felt heat rise in her cheeks at the compliment. "I do not feel graceful. Most days I feel like I am barely holding everything together." "That is because you are in the middle of it," Kane said, turning to look at her. "But from the outside, I see a woman who lost her husband, gave birth alone, and has been raising a baby and managing a homestead by herself for 6 months without giving up. That is not barely holding together. That is being strong as iron." Their eyes met and held in the fading light. Kane reached over slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, rough and warm, and Hannah found herself leaning into the touch. "Is it too soon?" Kane asked quietly. "Tell me if I am misreading this." "I do not know," Hannah admitted. "Part of me feels guilty, like I am betraying Thomas's memory, but another part of me thinks he would not want me to be alone and miserable for the rest of my life. He loved me enough to want me to be happy." "I am not trying to replace him," Kane said seriously. "What you had with your husband was real and important. I would never diminish that, but maybe we could build something new, something different but just as real." Hannah closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. Kane wiped them away gently with his thumb, then leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to her forehead. It was chaste and respectful, but it held a promise of more when she was ready. As summer deepened into July, the bond between them strengthened. Sarah, now 7 months old, had become significantly calmer. The colic had finally passed, and with Kane's help during the difficult nights, she had learned to sleep for longer stretches. She had started smiling and babbling, and it was clear she adored Kane. Her face lit up whenever he entered the room, and she would reach her chubby arms out to him with complete trust. "She thinks you are her papa," Hannah said one morning, watching Kane bounce Sarah on his knee while making exaggerated expressions that had the baby giggling uncontrollably. "Would that be such a bad thing?" Kane asked, looking up at Hannah with an intensity that made her heart race. "No," Hannah said softly. "It would not be bad at all." That evening, after Sarah was asleep, Kane asked Hannah to walk with him. They strolled away from the house toward a small rise that overlooked the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, and the desert air had cooled to something almost pleasant. "I need to tell you something," Kane said, taking Hannah's hand in his as they walked. "I came to Albuquerque drifting, no plans beyond maybe finding work on one of the ranches. I was lost and empty and did not know what I was looking for. Then I heard Sarah crying that night, and everything changed." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "These past weeks with you and Sarah have shown me what I have been missing. Not just purpose, but a reason to build something lasting instead of just surviving day to day. I know it has not been long, and I know you are still grieving your husband. But I need you to know that I have fallen in love with you, Hannah. With your strength and your kindness and the way you love your daughter with everything you have. And I love that little girl in there like she was my own blood." Hannah's breath caught, her heart pounding so hard she thought Kane must surely hear it. "I love you too," she whispered, the admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I did not think I could feel this way again, did not think I had the right to. But you have shown me that my heart is bigger than I thought, that there is room for what I felt for Thomas and what I feel for you." Kane pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it was not chaste or tentative. It was deep and passionate and full of all the feelings they had been building toward since that first night. Hannah melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, feeling safe and desired and alive in ways she had forgotten were possible. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kane rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, Hannah. Let me be the father Sarah deserves and the husband you deserve. Let me spend the rest of my life making sure you never face the dark nights alone again." "Yes," Hannah said without hesitation, knowing in her bones that this was right. "Yes, I will marry you." They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small Catholic church in Albuquerque. Hannah wore a dress she had made herself from blue calico, and Kane wore his best clothes, his dark hair combed back and his face freshly shaven. Father Rodriguez, who had presided over Thomas's funeral, married them with Sarah gurgling happily in Hannah's arms throughout the ceremony. The few neighbors they had came to witness the union, and if anyone thought it was too soon after Thomas's death, they were kind enough not to say so to Hannah's face. She saw only happiness and support in the eyes of the women who had helped her after her husband died, relief that she would not have to face the frontier alone anymore. "You take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward?" Father Rodriguez asked in his accented English. "I do," Kane said firmly, his eyes never leaving Hannah's face. "I swear before God and these witnesses that I will love and protect her and her daughter for all my days." "And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward?" "I do," Hannah replied, her voice clear and certain. "I swear to love and honor him for the rest of my life." When Kane kissed her as husband and wife, Sarah squealed and clapped her tiny hands, making everyone laugh. It felt like a blessing, like even this baby who would never remember her biological father was giving her approval to this new family they were creating. The modest reception was held at the house, which Kane had transformed over the past weeks. He had painted the exterior, expanded the porch, and built a proper barn for the animals. Inside, he had constructed a larger bed frame, additional shelves, and a separate sleeping area for Sarah. The place that had felt like a prison of loneliness and exhaustion now felt like a home filled with possibility. As the sun set and the few guests departed, Kane carried a sleeping Sarah to her new bed while Hannah cleaned up the remnants of the celebration. When he returned, he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Happy Mrs. Barrett," he murmured against her hair. Hannah turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become her husband, her partner, her love. "Happier than I thought possible. You gave me my life back, Kane. You saved me when I was drowning." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "I was just as lost as you were. We found our way back to the light together." That night, they consummated their marriage with a tenderness and passion that spoke of deep feeling rather than mere physical desire. Kane was gentle with Hannah, knowing it had been a long time and she had been through so much. He took his time learning what pleased her, and she discovered that her body had not forgotten how to respond to loving touch. Afterward, they lay tangled together, talking quietly about their hopes for the future. "I want to give Sarah brothers and sisters," Hannah said, tracing patterns on Kane's chest. "I want this house to be filled with the sound of children playing." "I want that too," Kane replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "But let us take our time. Make sure you are fully healed and strong before we add to our family. We have all the time in the world now." As summer turned to fall, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Kane proved to be everything Hannah could have wanted in a husband. He was patient with Sarah's occasional fussy nights, affectionate and attentive to Hannah, and tireless in his efforts to improve the homestead. He took on work helping neighboring ranchers with cattle drives and breaking horses, earning money to supplement what the land provided. Hannah bloomed under the security and love Kane provided. The exhaustion and anxiety that had been her constant companions faded away. She put on healthy weight, her eyes lost their haunted look, and her smile came easily and often. Sarah thrived as well, growing into a happy, chubby toddler who called Kane Papa and clearly adored him. One evening in late October, Hannah realized her monthly courses were late. She said nothing at first, not wanting to get Kane's hopes up, but when another week passed, she could no longer deny what her body was telling her. She was pregnant. She told Kane one night after they had put Sarah to bed. He was sitting at the table going over the accounts, trying to figure out if they could afford to buy more cattle come spring. Hannah came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. "Kane, I have something to tell you." He turned in his chair, immediately picking up on the nervous excitement in her voice. "What is it?" "I am with child. Our child." For a moment, Kane just stared at her, then a grin spread across his face so wide and joyous it transformed him completely. He stood quickly, sweeping Hannah into his arms and spinning her around, laughing with pure happiness. "We are going to have a baby?" he asked, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "We are going to have a baby," Hannah confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Kane said, cupping her face in his hands. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed. A family, a purpose, a reason to wake up grateful every morning. I love you so much, Hannah." "I love you too," she replied, standing on her toes to kiss him. "I never thought I could be this happy again. You gave me back hope when I had none left." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with none of the difficulties Hannah had experienced with Sarah. Kane doted on her shamelessly, insisting she rest more and take on fewer of the heavy chores. He talked to her growing belly every night, telling their unborn child stories and making promises about the life they would have together. Sarah, now walking and babbling constantly, seemed to understand something was happening. She would pat Hannah's belly gently and try to say baby in her limited vocabulary. Kane spent hours playing with her, teaching her words and games, being the father she deserved even though they shared no blood. In early June of 1879, Hannah went into labor on a warm afternoon while Kane was helping a neighbor repair a windmill. Sarah was with another neighbor woman who had agreed to watch her. Hannah managed to send word through a passing ranch hand, and Kane arrived home at a full gallop, his face white with fear. "I am all right," Hannah assured him, breathing through a contraction. "The midwife is on her way. Everything is normal." Kane stayed by her side through the entire labor, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool water and telling her how strong and beautiful she was. When their son was born just after sunset, screaming lustily and perfect in every way, Kane wept openly. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped infant in Hannah's arms. "A big, healthy boy." Hannah looked down at her son, seeing Kane's features already in the baby's face, and felt her heart expand even further. "What should we name him?" Kane reached out to touch the baby's tiny hand, which immediately wrapped around his finger with a surprisingly strong grip. "What about Thomas Kane Barrett? After your first husband and his new papa, he was part of bringing us together in a way. If he had not existed, neither would Sarah, and I would never have heard her crying that night. I want to honor his memory." Hannah felt tears stream down her face at the gesture, at Kane's generosity and understanding. "Thomas Kane Barrett. That is perfect. Thomas would have liked that, I think." "He would have liked you." "I hope so," Kane said, leaning down to kiss Hannah's forehead. "I am trying my best to be worthy of this family." Sarah met her baby brother the next morning, approaching the cradle with cautious curiosity. Kane lifted her up so she could see better, supporting her carefully. "This is your brother, Tommy," he told her. "You are a big sister now. That means you have to help Mama and Papa take care of him." Sarah reached out one small finger and touched Tommy's cheek, then looked at Kane and smiled. "Baby," she said clearly, one of her favorite new words. "That is right, sweetheart, our baby." The years that followed were full and rich. The homestead prospered under Kane's careful management. He expanded their cattle operation, breeding quality stock that sold well at market. Hannah maintained a large garden and began selling preserves and baked goods in town, adding to their income. They were not wealthy by any measure, but they were comfortable and secure, which felt like wealth after the poverty and struggle of Hannah's early widowhood. Sarah grew into a spirited little girl with her mother's dark hair and her biological father's brown eyes. She had vague memories of a time before Kane, but she never questioned that he was her papa. He treated her no differently than he treated Tommy, loving them both with his whole heart. When she started asking questions about why she looked different from Tommy, Hannah and Kane sat her down and told her the truth in terms she could understand. "Your first papa was a man named Thomas Jameson," Hannah explained gently, holding 5-year-old Sarah on her lap. "He loved you very much, but he got sick and died before you were born. Then Papa Kane came into our lives and chose to be your papa because he loved you the moment he met you." "So I have two papas?" Sarah asked, her young mind working through the concept. "You have one papa who is here with you now," Kane said, pulling her into his arms. "And you have another papa who is watching over you from heaven. Both of us love you more than anything in this world. Does that make sense?" Sarah nodded against his chest. "I like having two papas." "That means I am extra special." "You are," Kane assured her, kissing the top of her head, "the most special girl in all of New Mexico." When Sarah was 6 and Tommy was 4, Hannah discovered she was pregnant again. This time, She gave birth to twin girls, Catherine and Margaret, who Kane immediately nicknamed Katie and Maggie. The house that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with children's laughter and the controlled chaos of a large family. Kane proved to be a natural father, patient with the challenges each child brought. He taught them to ride, to understand the land, to treat animals with respect. He read to them every night, stories from the few books they owned and tales he made up himself. He never raised his hand in anger, though he could be firm when needed, and all 4 children adored him completely. Hannah watched her husband with their children and felt gratitude every single day for that night when Sarah's cries had brought him to her door. She had been given a second chance at love, at family, at happiness, and she never took it for granted. On a summer evening in 1885, Hannah and Kane sat on their porch watching the sunset while their 4 children played in the yard. Sarah, now 12, was helping Tommy, who was 10, teach the 6-year-old twins how to rope a fence post. Their laughter carried on the warm breeze. "You ever think about that night?" Hannah asked, leaning against Kane's shoulder. "The night you showed up at my door." "All the time," Kane replied, his arm coming around her shoulders. "It was the night my real life started. Everything before that was just marking time, waiting to find my purpose." "I was so desperate that night," Hannah remembered. "So tired and scared and alone. I had convinced myself I could not do it anymore, that I was failing Sarah by not being strong enough. Then you knocked on the door, and everything changed." Kane tilted her face up to look at him. "You were strong enough, Hannah. You would have found a way through even without me. But I am grateful every day that I got to be part of your life, part of your children's lives. You gave me back my heart when I thought it was too broken to ever feel whole again." "We healed each other," Hannah said, echoing words he had spoken on their wedding night years ago. 2 broken people who found each other at exactly the right moment. "Mama, Papa," Katie came running up to the porch, her face flushed with excitement. "Tommy says we can have a campfire tonight and sleep under the stars. Can we, please?" Kane looked at Hannah, who smiled and nodded. "All right," he said. "But you all have to gather the firewood and help set up, and Sarah is in charge of making sure you 2 do not wander off in the dark." The evening dissolved into happy chaos as they prepared for the family campout. Kane built a fire while the children gathered blankets and pillows. Hannah prepared food, and soon they were all settled around the flames, roasting meat and potatoes, telling stories and singing songs, as the children's voices rose in a slightly off-key rendition of "Oh, Susanna." Hannah caught Kane's eye across the fire. He smiled at her with such love and contentment that it made her chest tight with emotion. This was their life, built from the ashes of loss and loneliness into something beautiful and strong. Later, when the children had finally fallen asleep in a pile of blankets, Hannah and Kane sat close together, watching the fire die down to embers. The desert sky was brilliant with stars, stretching endlessly above them. "You think Sarah's birth papa is watching?" Kane asked quietly. "Do you think he knows she is happy and loved?" "I like to think so," Hannah replied. "I like to think Thomas is glad we found each other, that Sarah has a father who adores her. He would not have wanted us to spend our lives alone and grieving." "I hope my Maria feels the same way," Kane said. "I hope she knows I did not forget her, but I found room in my heart to love again. I think the people who truly loved us would always want us to find happiness again," Hannah said. "Love is not finite. It grows to accommodate more, not less." They sat in peaceful silence, 2 people who had found an unexpected second chance at the life they thought they had lost. The children slept peacefully nearby, 4 lives they were raising together with patience and devotion. The homestead around them was prosperous and secure. built through years of hard work and partnership. As the years continued to pass, the Barrett family became a fixture in the Albuquerque community. Kane occasionally helped the local sheriff when tracking skills were needed, putting his ranger training to use without taking on the burden of full-time law enforcement. He served on the town council and was known as a fair and honest man who could be counted on in times of trouble. Hannah became known for her compassion and her skills as a healer. She had learned herb lore from an elderly Mexican woman in town and often helped families who could not afford the doctor. Her home was always open to those in need, and more than once she and Kane took in families who had fallen on hard times, helping them get back on their feet. Sarah grew into a beautiful and capable young woman. At 18, she married the son of a neighboring rancher, a good man named Daniel Carter who reminded Hannah very much of Thomas Jameson. The wedding was held at the Barrett homestead, with the whole community in attendance. Kane walked Sarah down the makeshift aisle with tears streaming openly down his face. "I am not losing you," he told her before giving her away. "You will always be my first daughter, my Sarah girl, but I am happy you found someone who will love you the way you deserve." "You showed me what a good man looks like, Papa," Sarah replied, also crying. "You set the standard Daniel has to live up to. Thank you for choosing to be my father." The embrace they shared before Kane placed Sarah's hand in Daniel's was witnessed by everyone present, a testament to the bond between a man and the child who was not his by blood, but was completely his by choice and love. Tommy followed a different path. At 16, he announced his intention to become a lawyer, wanting to bring justice through the courts rather than at the end of a gun. Kane and Hannah supported his ambition completely, scrimp, and saving to send him to study in Santa Fe. He would eventually return to open a practice in Albuquerque, becoming one of the most respected attorneys in the territory. The twins, Katie and Maggie, were inseparable throughout their childhood. Katie had inherited Kane's adventurous spirit and wanted nothing more than to run the ranch. Maggie was quieter, more scholarly, and showed an early talent for teaching. Both paths were encouraged by parents who believed their daughters could do anything they set their minds to. In 1895, Kane and Hannah celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary. Their hair was streaked with gray now, their faces weathered by years of southwestern sun and wind, but their love had only deepened with time. They sat on the same porch where they had spent countless evenings, watching the sunset paint the desert in familiar gold and crimson. "Do you have any regrets?" Hannah asked, taking Kane's hand in hers. "Not a single one," Kane replied without hesitation. "Except maybe that I did not find you sooner, but then, maybe we both needed to go through what we went through to be ready for each other." "I think you are right," Hannah agreed. "I loved Thomas, and that love taught me what a good partnership looked like. Losing him taught me to value every moment. All of that prepared me to recognize what we could have together when you showed up at my door that night." "That night changed everything," Kane said, pulling her close. "One crying baby and a desperate mother, and suddenly I had a reason to stop drifting and start living again." "Sarah does not remember her first papa," Hannah said, a touch of sadness in her voice. "Sometimes I worry I did not do enough to keep his memory alive for her." "She knows he existed and that he would have loved her," Kane assured her. "But Hannah, I am her papa in every way that matters. I was there when she took her first steps, said her first words, skinned her first knee. I taught her to ride and to be strong. Thomas gave her life, and I am grateful for that gift, but I am the one who got to raise her, and that is the greater gift." Hannah leaned her head on his shoulder, content with his words. He was right. The love between a parent and child was not about blood. It was about showing up every day, through the hard times and the easy ones, choosing to be present and committed. Their golden years were peaceful and full. They became grandparents, first to Sarah and Daniel's children, then eventually to Tommy's, and finally to Katie's. Maggie chose not to marry, dedicating herself to teaching and becoming the principal of Albuquerque's first public school. Each of their children and grandchildren knew the story of how Hannah and Kane had met, how a crying baby in the night had brought together two broken people and created a family built on love and choice rather than just blood. On a warm spring evening in 1903, Kane suffered a heart attack while working in the barn. He was 72 years old and had lived a full, rich life. Hannah was with him at the end, holding his hand as he had once held hers through Sarah's birth and so many other difficult moments. "I love you," Kane whispered, his voice weak but clear. "You gave me the best years of my life. Every day with you was a gift." "I love you too," Hannah replied through tears. "You saved me, Kane. You and Sarah saved each other, and we built something beautiful together." "Tell our children I am proud of them," Kane said, struggling for breath. "Tell them to take care of you and each other." "I will," Hannah promised. "But you are not leaving yet. You are too stubborn for that." Kane managed a small smile. "I am tired, love. It is time for me to rest. But I will be waiting for you, wherever we go next. This is not goodbye, just see you later." Those were his last words. Hannah felt his hand go slack in hers, saw the life leave his eyes, and knew that her heart had broken for the second time in her life. But even through the crushing grief, she felt gratitude for the 25 years they had shared, for the life they had built, for the love that had sustained them both. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of New Mexico. Kane had touched countless lives through his kindness and integrity, and people came from miles around to pay their respects. Sarah, Tommy, Katie, and Maggie stood with their mother, supporting her as she had supported them throughout their lives. The grandchildren, ranging in age from toddlers to young adults, said goodbye to the man who had shown them what it meant to be good and strong and loving. Hannah lived another 8 years after Kane's death, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She never remarried. She said she had been blessed with 2 great loves in her life, and that was more than most people got even once. She spent her remaining years teaching her grandchildren the same herb lore she had learned, telling stories of the old days, and keeping alive the memory of both Thomas Jameson and Kane Barrett. On a quiet morning in May of 1911, Hannah passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75. She was laid to rest next to Kane in the Albuquerque cemetery, under a headstone that read, "Hannah Jameson Barrett, beloved wife, mother, grandmother." She loved deeply and was deeply loved in return. The homestead remained in the family, passed down through generations. The story of how it all began with a crying baby and a cowboy who walked the floor until sunrise became family legend. Great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren would gather on that same porch and listen, as the tale was told of how their family started with an act of simple kindness that grew into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Sarah, who lived to be 93, never tired of telling anyone who would listen about the night her crying brought a stranger to their door, a stranger who became her father and gave her mother a second chance at happiness. She would hold her own grandchildren and great-grandchildren and tell them that real family was not always about blood. It was about showing up, about choosing to love, about walking the floor with a crying baby in the middle of the night because someone needed help, and you had the ability to give it. The legacy of Kane and Hannah Barrett was not just the land they had worked or the children they had raised. It was the lesson they had taught through their lives, that love could heal broken hearts, that second chances were possible, that families could be built through choice as strongly as through birth, and that sometimes the most important thing one human being could do for another was simply to be there in the darkest hours of the night, offering comfort and hope until the sun rose on a new day. Their story became part of the fabric of Albuquerque's history, a reminder that even in the harsh and unforgiving landscape of the frontier, gentleness and compassion could flourish. The house Kane had rebuilt and expanded still stood well into the 20th century, a landmark that locals pointed out to visitors with pride. "That is where the Barretts lived," they would say. "Started with a widow and her crying baby and a cowboy who stopped to help. Built one of the finest families in New Mexico from that single night of kindness." And on quiet nights, when the desert wind whistled across the plains and the stars shone brilliant in the endless sky, some claimed you could still hear the echo of a deep voice singing old cowboy ballads and a baby's cries slowly fading into peaceful sleep. It was the ghost of that first night, some said, forever imprinted on the land as a testament to how one act of compassion could change everything. But whether ghosts existed or not, the truth remained. Hannah Jameson and Kane Barrett had found each other at precisely the moment they both needed saving. Her exhaustion and his purposelessness had collided on that spring night in 1878, and from that collision had come a love story for the ages. Not a perfect love, for no love between imperfect humans ever is, but a real love. A love built on mutual respect and support, on shared hardships and triumphs, on choosing each day to be there for each other no matter what came their way. It was the kind of love that frontier life demanded and sometimes destroyed. But in their case, it had created something that outlasted them both. Their descendants carried forward the values they had lived by: hard work, integrity, compassion, and the understanding that family was what you made it, not just what you were born into. The story of the crying baby and the cowboy who walked the floor became more than just family history. It became a parable about the importance of helping neighbors, about not turning away from someone in need, about how the smallest acts of kindness could have ripples that extended far beyond what anyone could imagine. It reminded people that everyone was fighting battles others knew nothing about, and sometimes all it took to change a life was showing up with an open heart and willing hands. In the end, that was what Kane and Hannah's story truly represented: the possibility of redemption and renewal even after devastating loss. They had both been broken by tragedy, both left adrift in a world that seemed too hard to face alone. But they had found each other, had chosen to build something new from the fragments of what they had lost, and in doing so, had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. The land they had worked continued to flourish under the care of their descendants. The values they had instilled continued to guide their family through good times and bad. And the love they had shared continued to inspire everyone who heard their story to believe that second chances existed, that healing was possible, and that sometimes the most heroic thing a person could do was simply to be there for someone who needed them, even if that someone was a complete stranger crying alone in the dark.